We're about to dive into a legal case that's 100 years old, but you'll be surprised to see how it quietly shapes the deals you and I make every single day. Let's get right into it. So, let me ask you this. You're buying a used car, and the seller says, oh, it's never had any issues. Later, you find a receipt for a tiny, minor repair. Is the deal off? Can one little white lie completely tear up a whole contract? Well, that's the big question we're digging into today. All right, so where exactly is that line? You know, the one between a bit of harmless sales talk and a lie that actually breaks a deal. As we're about to see, the law has a really specific way of figuring this out, and it all boils down to one key idea.
And look, this isn't just about cars, right? It happens all the time. In business deals, when you're buying a house, even when you're just clicking buy now online. Sellers always want to make their stuff sound amazing. So how does the law tell the difference between just puffing something up and an outright deal-breaking lie?
Well, it uses this really cool tool called the materiality test. It sounds kind of formal, but it's a powerful idea that basically acts like a filter, separating the small, insignificant stuff from the statements that legally really matter.
Okay, so here's the heart of it. A material representation isn't just any old statement. It has to be a cornerstone of the decision. The big question is always this. If you had known the real truth, would you still have signed the contract? If your answer is no way, then that statement was probably material. Let's make this super clear. Imagine someone selling a house claims it has a brand new roof, but it's actually 20 years old. That's almost certainly material, right? But what if they say the garden has the prettiest roses on the block? That's probably not. See the difference? One affects the core value and your decision to buy. The other is just, sales fluff. Now, to really see this whole thing in action, we have to jump in a time machine and go all the way back to 1924 to a fascinating case called Nicholas versus Thompson. This is where the modern idea of materiality was really put to the test. So here are the quick facts. The case, Nicholas versus Thompson, happened in 1924, and at its core was a pretty simple problem. A statement was made during a sale, and later it turned out that statement just wasn't true. And the buyer, well, he wanted out. So you've got your two main players, Thompson, who's the seller, and Nicholas, the buyer. While they were hammering out the deal, Thompson made a very specific claim. Nicholas later said, hey, I relied on that exact claim when I decided to go through with this whole thing. And this gets us to the million-dollar question, or, maybe the $1,000 question back in 1924. Everybody agreed the statement was false. That wasn't even up for debate. The entire case was about whether that lie was important enough to sink the whole deal. Was it the actual reason Nicholas said yes? So how in the world did the judge figure this out? Well, they didn't just ask if the statement was false. They focused on its impact. And this is where we get to see the materiality test in action, breaking the whole problem down into these really clear, logical steps. The court's logic was just beautifully simple. First, they said, okay, yep, the statement was untrue. We all agree. But second, and this is the absolute key, they investigated the why. Did Nicholas agree to this deal because of this one specific statement? And after looking at everything, they got to their third point. Nope. It just wasn't the main reason for his decision. And from that reasoning, the final verdict was pretty straightforward. Because that untrue statement wasn't the critical thing that convinced Nicholas to buy, it was officially deemed not material. The lie just wasn't big enough to break the deal. The contract had to stand. Okay, so a century-old case gets settled. But why are we still talking about it today? Because the logic they used in that courtroom back in 1924 created this incredibly powerful precedent that pretty much shapes the foundation of contract law as we know it. And that brings us to the most important takeaway here. Not every fib breaks the deal. The real power of a statement is in its materiality. Did it fundamentally change your decision to say yes? That question, which was answered so clearly in Nicholas v. Thompson, is still the very first one lawyers and judges ask in these kinds of disputes today. So let's circle all the way back to our car. That minor repair that the seller didn't mention, yeah, it probably isn't a deal breaker. Unless the buyer can prove they only bought that car because they truly believed it was absolutely 100% flawless, the deal is going to stand. The lie wasn't material to the main point of buying a working car. So, as we wrap this up, here's a final thought for you. In our world today, which is just filled with marketing spin, 5-star ratings, and online reviews, the principle from this old case is more relevant than ever. It forces us to constantly ask what's just noise and what's a statement of fact that's so important that it truly makes or breaks the deal.